can't hear you.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, it's recording. It said it was recording.
Okay, awesome. Thank you so much.
Yeah. As I mentioned, I graduated from Georgia State. I do like Georgia. I've been there all my life. I've moved from California when I was 9 to Georgia. So I was raised in Georgia. So that's a culture shock for someone who identifies as being Latina. Going from bilingual classes to just monolingual classes was also a culture shock as well. But please, throughout the presentation, throughout today, please call me Joanna as well. And so today our objectives are, I'm hoping that we hit all 3 objectives today. It's pretty much gaining the knowledge and understanding of the characteristics and demographics of the Latinx population, a better understanding of the barriers and culture-related issues that fall under this population, and becoming more knowledgeable in culture elements as they relate to treatment and implications in working with the Latinx. As I mentioned, as someone whose background is Latina, I feel like my upbringing has prepared me to serve people who share my cultural background. Nevertheless, my experience has made me aware of further areas of growth as well in serving my clients. And so like I identify as a first-generation college student, a US citizen, fluent in Spanish and in English, but also second-generation Latina. So I'm aware of those identities as well, and that those identities may not be also shared with my clients. And so the question that I want to ask students is, it's like, what are your first thoughts when you think of Latinx population? Like what comes up in your mind?
Texas for me.
Huh?
Texas.
Texas for you? Okay.
Yes.
Not meant to be a trick question, I promise.
The culture?
Okay, culture. What do you mean by culture?
Like how your culture is so different, like from someone else's. Like I'm African American, so like the difference between it.
Okay.
I don't know if that will be hurtful for somebody who's Latino, but when I think about Latino people, I used to be somewhere and then I think about they eat a lot of red meat, and then I think about tequila, think about margarita, those kind of things. I don't know. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So we have culture. When you have food involved, we have tequila, we have Texas. And so we all have our own thoughts of what a Latino or Latinx individual or what the population represents as well. Just to give you a little bit of demographics about this population, the population has reached to 62.1 million in 2020. There has been an increase of 23% over the past decade that has outpaced the nation's 7% overall population growth. The population grew by 50% or more from 2010 to 2020, which is a greater than any other racial or ethnic group as well. If you look at our US population, 1 in 5 people identify as being Hispanic or Latinx. Also, more than 20 individual Latinx have identified as multiracial. And this could be due to the result that the 2020 census had some changes made. And so it's easier for people to identify with multiple races. And also there's a growing diversity among the Latinx population. Additionally, contrary to popular belief, newborns have driven a growth of the US Latinx population. So this is a trend that accelerated in 2010. And then this is due to a decline in immigration, which is a reversal historical trend compared to the late 1980s and 1990s, where immigration was the reason for the increase of the population growth. And traditionally, a lot of the population growth was in certain states, like in the South or like in the West kind of thing. So like in the 1990s, like 86% of the Latinx lived in 9 states, which were Arizona, California, Colorado, Florida, Illinois, New Jersey, New Mexico, New York, and Texas. But in the past decade, there has been a trend where a lot of Latinx are moving into populations or into states that you don't see a large, traditionally a large population. And so those states have been like Georgia, North Carolina, Louisiana, Alabama, Michigan, South Dakota, Washington, and Pennsylvania. North Dakota was the state with the fastest Latinx population growth. And it could be because the top oil producing counties are in the state. And so that means a lot of people moving towards it for work reasons as well. Louisiana also had an increase, but that had to do because they have private prisons that serve federal immigration detention centers as well. And so in the past, so the census also counts people who are in immigration detention centers, which raise up some numbers as well. So this trend is expected to continue. And if it goes in this trend, it's expected to increase to have over 119 million or 31% of the nation's population by 2060. If you look in 2015, it was expected to be 119 million. Now in 2020, we're at 62.1. So if my math is right, we're more than halfway there, you can say. And so all 50 states in the District of Columbia have seen a growth in their Latinx population since 2010. So pretty much we're everywhere, you can say. 72% of Latinx ages 5 and above speak language. US born Latinx are driving the growth of English proficiency. And so it's been up 50%. It went up from 50% to 72% in just 10 years, you can say. 37% of Latinx immigrants also speak English as well. 70% speak Spanish at home, and that's actually been a decline as well in the past 10 years among US born as US born Latinos. 94% of Latinx immigrants speak Spanish at home. And so even though the number has decreased, the number of people in the US who do speak Spanish has grown from 24.6 million to 39.1 million as well. 42% of Latinx adults ages 25 and above have at least some college experience. And so there has been an increase in both men and women. However, more Latinx women have attended college. The enrollment of Latinx in college increased from 14% to 19%. But I also want you to remember that I mentioned that there was more women have attended college, that there is a gender gap in college enrollment that exists among all racial groups as well. People of Mexican origin account for nearly 62%, which is followed by Puerto Ricans. And there's 6 other groups that have at least 1 million or more, which are like Cubans, Salvadorians, Dominican, Guatemalans, Colombians, and Hondurans as well. 4 and 5 are US citizens. The median age is 30. So Latinos are among the youngest racial or ethnic group in the US, but they also saw a large increase in median age over the past decade. And so I know I mentioned like Cubans, Salvadorians, they have like, increased roughly like 1 million or more people each. Does anybody want to take a guess on who is the fastest population growth in the past 10 years? Like from what country of origin?
Venezuela.
Yeah. Who said that? That's right.
I said it is because of the war over there.
Okay.
Right?
Yeah. Yeah. Venezuela is one of them. Guatemala and Honduras as well. Those three are the fastest population growth in the US as well. But even with it's still a very young population, but despite the large and growing population of Latinx individuals in the US, number of studies still highlight the underutilization of mental health services, which can be concerning given that Latinx tends to have a higher prevalence rates of psychotic disorders and depressive symptoms compared to non-Latinx whites that which studies have shown in the past too. So it's, for me, it's very important to note and give this information that Latinx is a very heterogeneous group. It comes from a very diverse and social and economic and even geographic background. All of these can be very different depending on family heritage and national origin. However, there are some culture characteristics that bring these diverse backgrounds together. I mentioned this is going to be interactive, so anyone have any guesses of what could be your culture, some culture characteristics?
Maybe like family being important.
Mm-hmm. Family,
Religion.
religion. Mm-hmm.
I don't really know if it's a characteristic, but like cooking.
Cooking? Yeah. So language, religion, spirituality, cuisine, comida, family, media, entertainment, and identity. So these are just some culture characteristics. Like, for example, in regards to language, traditionally, Latinx families often teach their children Spanish as a way of passing down their heritage and culture. Like growing up in my parents' household, I was not allowed to speak English to them. They will pretend that they wouldn't hear me if I spoke English to them, so I had to speak Spanish. And so I learned English at school. And like I mentioned before, there has been a decrease of Latinos speaking Spanish at home, but there's still an increase of general population speaking it. Religion and spirituality represents a very highly Christian group, specifically Catholic or Protestant, but it's not the only form of religion and spirituality, because there's also curanderos, which is like folk healing, and that's a form of treatment modality, but it's also part of spirituality as well in this population. Someone mentioned cooking, I believe. I think I heard that, which is the cuisine or comida, like I like to say. It comes from, Mexican cuisine, includes from corn-based dishes such as tortillas, tacos, tamales, mole, to churrascarias, which is like a Brazilian steakhouse, arepas, which are Colombian, and ceviche, which is Peruvian. You're starting to see a lot of these forms of cuisines in food trucks, especially here in Texas. I'm not sure in Ohio, kind of thing. And then there's family. We talked about family. Family places a strong value on family. Historically, this group tends to have a large, close-knit families. It's not uncommon for multiple generations to live in a house or nearby each other. You can have 3 or 4 generations living in one household. But these living situations over the years have become less common, but the emphasis of well-being of the family still continues, which makes them very group-oriented. Sorry, with family gatherings being commonplace. Then media and entertainment. There are Spanish language media outlets out there like Univision, Telemundo, that brings Spanish movies and Spanish news into the home kind of thing. But over time also, I am really sorry, I have something in my throat. And brings in the soap operas, the telenovelas into the house that kind of like, Netflix is even showing these now these days as well. Football, soccer, very big as well. And then music. You see artists that started in the Spanish community transition into American. And so they're hitting both worlds as well. And music is very emphasized in different parts of music. I believe Caribbean music or something also played an influence in jazz music as well. So there's this kind of like connection and transitions as well going on. In regards to identity, when they ask Latinos, like, how do you identify? They most often use the name of their ancestors of origin, either Mexican, Cuban, Colombian, Salvadorian. And then there's a small percentage that describe themselves just as Americans. And so lately I've been throwing out these words like Latinx, Latina, Latino, Latina, Hispanic. And so I got to give you a little background of what all these terms mean. So Hispanic was the first terminology. Prior to the 1970s, the US Census classified Latin immigrants as white. As a result, this group was very under-resourced. And so Latinx activists lobbied for a new category that will kind of like bring this whole community together. So Hispanics refers to people from Spain or Spanish-speaking origin. So it would include people from Spain, as I mentioned, but not people from Brazil where Portuguese was spoken. So that was a term that was used for a long time. Then there's this other term, that's called Chicano, which refers to Americans of Mexican ancestry. They do not identify as Hispanic. This term was very popular during the civil rights movement in the 1960s. And so it's mainly used by older generations, but Mexican American youth are reviving the term. And so I hear this in Texas and a lot of at UT, a lot of students when they come in, like, what are your identities? They're like, oh, I am a Chicana kind of thing. So I already know kind of like, okay, Mexican ancestry kind of thing. The other term is Latino or Latina. And so the community started rejecting the Hispanic term due to its ties with Spain, because Spain colonized much of Latin America. Therefore, Latino is used, or Latino Latina is used as an alternative, but it refers to people of Latin American descent living in the US, also includes Brazilians and excludes people from Spain. Then the new term, one of the newest terms is Latinx, which is a gender neutral or non-binary term for Latino, Latina, and pushes back on gender language to be more inclusive. There's this podcast called Code Switch. If you haven't heard it, I recommend it. Where Mark Hugo Lopez mentions that the term Latinx is actually 20 years old, but we began to use it widely only in the past 6 years. This term has become controversial, not because of its inclusivity of gender, being gender neutral and non-binary, because it's almost used exclusively only in the US. Some people in the community feel that the X imposes the American English language standards onto the Spanish language. And so this term is mostly used, and you could say in higher education, where a lot of the main, like more than 90% of the Latino or Latinx population haven't used the term or not even aware of the term. Then there's this other new term called Latine. So it's Latine, Latine, which offers a more organic alternative to Latinx. Latina, because it was designed to work with the Spanish language. It just flows kind of Latine. And it can be pronounced, while Latinx, it's really difficult for a lot of people to pronounce it as well. So we have all these different terms, and they've changed throughout the years and the decades kind of thing. Some are still being used, like Hispanic, Latino, Latinx, Latino, Chicano. But it's important to note that it really depends on the individual's identity and preference. Nonetheless, these terms do allow us in getting the correct number to track growth within this population. And so if you're sitting with a client, it's always important to ask kind of like, well, what's your preference? What would you like to identify? Because they may identify as Hispanic, or they may identify as Latina. And so it's kind of like going back to that individual, like what is their preference as well? Any questions about that?
So I had a question, like, just I really appreciate that you are covering this, and this is something, it has been something that I have always confused. Which one is like both academically and in social context is more, politically correct, or which one is most preferred? I know that you mentioned that the Latinx is very new, just like in academic language in the last 6 years, but which one would you prefer? Which one is the more comprehensive one?
That's a tough one. Academically, like in the academic world, they're using Latinx. I even asked this question when I met with a group, a student organization called Latino Studies at UT. And I was like, there's these terms being thrown out. Which one would you prefer? And they were honest. There was someone who was an older generation, and he was like, I'm more comfortable with Hispanic or Latino. And then the younger generation was like, we prefer Latinx because, it's the term that everyone's using right now. Is we identify, it's non-gender, and it's gender neutral, it's non-binary. And so I know I'm not answering your question, I'm answering more like a therapist, it depends. But it academically, if you look at if you look at research and all that, they're using Latinx in some of them. Latine, it's the newer term. I haven't not seen it in any research papers yet, but a lot of students are identifying with that term, the younger generation. That makes sense?
Yes, thank you.
Mm-hmm. Any other questions? Okay. So I wanted to share a 3-minute snippet of, it's about Latino men try therapy for the first time. That's what it's called. So let me wish me luck and see if I can figure this out. Are you able to see it?
Yes.
Okay. So, Pero back in about almost 3 years ago, did a video about, Latino men trying therapy for the first time. And the reason why I introduce this, because it gives you an idea of not what only Latino men think about therapy, but also like what men think about therapy, but Latino men. And we'll talk, that gives us into transition to the next thing. So can everyone hear it?
I am Gabriel
Yes.
Norte. We are men doing therapy for the first time. I don't know anything about therapy. I still don't understand the concept of it. I'm here to learn more about it. I never thought I needed therapy. I think as a man and also as a Latin man, it's not something talked about. It's seen as weakness. But I've never done it because in my family, we were always told that therapy and anything that had to do with it was very much like a white American thing. Latinos we do not really talk about mental health. Any thought of needing help kind of shows just a crack in who you are as a man. They always wanted us to figure it out for ourselves because they were like, we did it.
Why can't you?
To be honest with you, I'm walking in here with a clear mind, but at the same time, I want to learn more about it. Is this truly something that benefits people?
I'm hoping that this experience will not only help other men to feel more comfortable with the idea of it, because I know it does help, but also make me feel more comfortable in being able to tackle some of those issues.
So they were going to meet a therapist for the first time.
I'm excited to meet this therapist. Vamos arriba.
I think this is a new step for me, and I'm really looking forward to it.
Hi, my name is Adriana Alejandre. I'm a licensed marriage and family therapist and founder of Latinx Therapy. It was founded so that people can have a source for mental health. We took it upon ourselves to start a directory where people can find a Latinx therapist also. Today, a therapist from our network will be providing therapy services.
Hi guys.
Hey, nice to meet you.
Likewise, I'm Maritza Placencia, licensed marriage and family therapist, and I'm here today to do a one-on-one session with all three of you. I've been a therapist since 2009, and I'm very experienced working with Latinx men.
What's the difference between like Latinx men?
Latinx men tend to have a more difficult time to open up emotionally because there's a lot of stigma behind that. So I'm pretty comfortable helping Latinx men through the process of getting to that more comfortable place in therapy.
I'm nervous, I gotta say.
The fact that you have a lot of experience working with Latin men specifically, I don't know, I feel like I'm seeing like a medium or something. Like, I don't know. It's
I
like,
think that's what it feels like we're going to talk to a psychic.
And this is going on.
What I know is how to get more in touch with what it is that you're comfortable putting out there for anybody to know.
What is the process like when it comes to a therapy session?
We start wherever you feel comfortable. If you don't feel comfortable talking about anything in particular about yourselves, we can start with answering questions about therapy. When somebody's never experienced therapy, that's where I start with them and just kind of putting them at ease, letting them know that those are very common concerns that most men come into therapy with.
Because I always seen therapy as an American thing.
Yeah, that's what I was saying too.
I didn't grow up in my household. Like, if I asked my mom, mommy, let's go to therapy. ¿Cómo que therapy? ¿Qué necesita therapy el diablo? Tú estás bien ahí, allá en la República hay gente que está pasando hambre y está feliz. Y está feliz.
¿Por qué tienes ansiedad? Like, why? And so I'm like, oh, I don't have anxiety. At least it's fine. I'm fine.
especially being a man as well, is like, I think you just have to play, you have to be strong.
It is seen as like a weakness.
Yeah.
You know, we're told to be self-reflective, like deal with it.
What can we expect?
You can expect for me to answer any questions if you just want to focus on us just talking about your concerns about therapy, or if you have anything in particular that you want to and feel comfortable talking about. And then you might even walk away thinking, I want to go to therapy after this.
Yeah.
So
I just got nervous. I was fine until you were like, what? Let's open up now, right?
So I just want to give you that quick little introduction of it. Now I'm trying to figure out. Oh, I'm back. Okay. Any thoughts or comments or concerns about the 3 minutes? It's 20 minutes long. I recommend you go seeing it. You can hear the different perspectives and all three men also. And so Latinx history with therapy, as they talked about in the video, there's like this, we have this legacy of disconnection and stigma when it comes to mental health. But I like to mention, that we all know that mental health stigma is not just a Latinx issue, but it's a struggle across, including, populations who identify as white as well. In Latinx households, like they mentioned, if therapy brought up, people are like, no, you don't need therapy. We'll figure it out within the family kind of thing. It's always within the family. Stigma is alive and well, and it exists in history and our history as well. But it's also important. It's very important, and you have to be careful not to marginalize the community as like, oh, you don't go to therapy because of stigma, because stigma can be very different from other communities, from one community to another as well. In the Latinx community or in some BIPOC communities as well, it's centered around racial prejudice, discrimination, marginalization, or even oppression due to racial background. Institutions in our society have not been a safe place for us to go and talk about mental health or just talk about anything or going to the authorities for help due to, like I mentioned, our history as well. And so it might be a little different. Also, there is a lack of representation. And we'll talk about that, talk about some of the barriers about how language can be a barrier as well on our accessibility. But when it comes to lack of representation, there isn't a lot of Latinx therapists out there, or if they are, they're not accessible for some populations as well. And what Latinx therapy is doing, as they mentioned, they built that directory as well. And so Dr. Manuel Samaripa said that the art of using talk therapeutically is not solely a white people thing. Historically, ancestrally, we went to our community, our elders, our circle when we had struggles or difficulties. We in fact used talk as a path to healing. And so about only 20% of Latinx with symptoms of what we consider psychological disorders talk to a doctor about their concerns, and only 10% see a mental health specialist. And so when Dr. Samaripa is talking about talk as a path to healing, it's what we call plática, which is a pathway to personal and therapeutic connection. So plática, think of it as small talk, but it's more discussing, being more personable, bringing in the personalismo aspect, kind of like it individualizes each interaction. Its purpose is to know more personally the person in front of you, like who is sitting in front of you. And so in therapy, the person's story is unique. You're also using interconnectedness of our own individual healing that we do, the work on ourselves, but also piece of community and family that is also part of the healing process. And so our culture styles of interaction, values, and treatment that emphasize, our culture values in regards to Latinx population emphasize affect, like emotions, rather than cognition, which is really well going on in the community as well. And so which of these can be a barrier for Latinx in relation to treatment access and adherence? Is it language, location, immigration status, or all of the above?
All of the above.
Thank you. It is all of the above. And those were just some barriers. It's important to note that research has not yet sufficiently differentiated the barriers faced among subgroups. So although they likely vary considering race, skin color, and social, economic, and immigration status among the various groups. For stigma around mental health, Latinx who suffer from symptoms of depression may be perceived as going crazy or volviéndose loco, like they would say, or loca in Spanish kind of thing. And so an individual with a mental health disorder may be viewed dangerous by the community or by within their family. And so the stigma contributes to shame in discussing issues of trauma with mental health professionals. At UT, I facilitate a group for women who identify as Latinx who've gone through a sexual experience, and it's called Sanando desde adentro, Healing from Within. And today we talked about family and shame and how disclosing their sexual abuse to family, they would put the blame on them, or like it stays in the family, don't go to the authorities. But if you do go to the authorities, or if you tell someone else, you're ruining the family kind of thing, like you're ruining our family image. So the stigma that we talked about, contributes to shame, like I said, discussing issues of trauma with other mental health professionals, because that has to stay within the family. So that's another factor. In regards to culture stigma, we also talk about, mental health issues can be related to physical. So instead of mental problems, so they go to a physician instead of a counselor, because there seems to be, it's more susceptible to go to a medical doctor than a clinician as well. We have social economic status. Latinx may have a higher rate of poverty, so leaving them with fewer resources. And if they have an undocumented status, they have fewer material resources for treatment as well. There's also the fear of deportation and the fear of authorities. Language can be a barrier. They may feel overwhelmed with the process of seeking and engaging in therapy in their second language, if English is their second language. So that could be another barrier. Health insurance. We all know health insurance is also very expensive as well. And, you know, there might be employments where they have temporary employment or multiple part-time positions as a result. So health benefits may not be offered, or they may be too expensive. When it comes to health insurance, about maybe only half will seek out mental health services compared to like 20% of Latinos who don't have insurance will seek out services. Time constraint is another one. They may work temporary positions, may only have a limited time available to seek services. I see this also at a university counseling center. I have students who work and go to school, and the only time that they're able to see a counselor is after work, which could be after 5 o'clock. Our center is only open to 8 to 5. But thankfully, we have partnered up with other resources and other avenues, you can say platforms, that give access to those students so they're able to seek services for free as well. So they're able to have those services even after work. So time constraint could be a barrier. Immigration is another barrier. But when I'm talking about immigration, it's not just undocumented, but also documented, because there's like family dislocation, you know, moving from one place to another. There's culture change for individuals and across generation, family difficulties. There's family conflicts. There's intergenerational conflict. For example, like a first generation versus a second generation. There's biculturalism, there's stress. A child may not speak the language, so they may not speak Spanish, or they do speak Spanish and they're being used as translators within the family. And then we also have like neglect and physical abuse, like I talked about, domestic violence, and trauma and stress, and then even gender roles. Families may stigmatize women in a more complete and isolating manner than they do with male roles as well. Another barrier could be, like we talked about, language. Any other barriers that anyone else can think of?
On the locations.
Mm-hmm.
Don't live near, like, don't have a car, don't live near public transportation, trying to get to the office.
Exactly. Yeah. Or if you are undocumented and don't have a driver's license as well, you can't get there. Yeah, location's a huge one. That accessibility piece is huge. You know, now we're all talking about telehealth, you know, like, you know, makes it easier to assess therapy, but you also have to take in consideration, does everyone have good internet connection too? And so that could be another barrier as well. And so considering our common cultures and Latin culture in counseling, I want you to take into consideration of some of these characteristics as well. And so culture plays a key role in our ability to influence the behavior in our clients. And when it comes to some common culture themes, are familia, which is a strong feeling of loyalty, reciprocity, and solidarity among members of the same family. So we can ask questions of like, who do they connect with? Do they connect with the community or with the family? What's the family structure? One thing that's important about family is that sometimes you may have a client that may not connect with their family and it's not their safe place. And we make the assumption kind of like, oh, Latinos are big with family. It's true, but sometimes that may not be a safe space for them, but they have a chosen family, which could be someone in the community. And so it's always important to ask them, like, what's your family structure? Like, who do you connect with? Who do you consider to be family as well? Respeto, respect, defer to those positions of authority. And, you know, we kind of use the term usted, kind of similar to sir or ma'am. Personal relationships or personalismo as like form of friendliness, kindness. Once trust has been developed, the client may develop a close personal bond with you as a therapist, with your therapist. Then we have confianza, which is trust. It's respecting the client's culture and showing personal interest. A clinician can expect to win a patient or a client's trust just by asking and respecting kind of their culture as well, where they come from. And then we have spirituality. Not all Latinos, as I mentioned, identify as spiritual. Some can use it as a form of instrument for recovery. It could be a protected factor. I hear a lot in with my college students, spirituality for them is a protective factor when they have suicidal ideations as well. Curanderismo is a form of folk healing that includes various techniques such as prayer, herbal medicine, healing rituals, something that's utilized in health-related fields, including behavioral health as well. And so I want you to, these are some key components to keep in mind when working with Latinx population. Identity, we've talked a little bit about identity, like the ethnic identity is a self-protective strategy for coping with prejudice, discrimination, and stigmatization. Family, like I mentioned, it may not be a safe place for us, even though we talked about familismo and collectivism is a key to Latinx. Some may not connect with their families. It could be harmful. So we could talk more about community-based of like the support that they can get from the community or who their chosen family is. You can still, like I mentioned, honor that pillar of family by asking them once again, I know I'm repeating, but like the chosen family or community is still important for them. It can be applied in healthier ways. Our family wounds are also cultural wounds. So there's a form of unhealthiness of our families come from generations, from invasion to migration. Coming to the United States, for example, its family separations can be devastating. It's not a new thing. It's just kind of like the latest iteration of our cultural wounds as well. Spirituality, like I talked about earlier, is different for each individuals and families. It's not about imposing or saying that it's important in all Latinx clients. However, if we look at our communities, we see that spirituality is still important, a thread in our life experience or impact to keep in mind. I see the importance of faith and honoring and recognizing continuity of the health, which is the mind, body, and the spirit. And so these are some general guidelines for clinical practice. I know we talked about them throughout the presentation, but it's more about building rapport and respect. Important to engage in a respectful, warm, and mutual introduction with the client. It's important to discuss expectations, similar to what the video showed, where the therapist was answering their questions. Like, you ask questions and this is what we're going to work on. So kind of like there's no surprises, especially when it's a new environment for the individual. Have the client state the problem in their own words or problems as they see it. Sometimes there are words that they feel comfortable saying in Spanish, or if you're able to provide that opportunity, provide that space, saying like, I'm feeling this way. And if they just say it, it gives it kind of like a different meaning. Yes, you may not know what it means, or you may, But you can always ask kind of like, what does that mean? And then like from now you can use that term kind of thing. I've had clients in before that have spoken different languages. Like, I just feel this way, but I can't say it in English because I don't know how to say it. And I'm like, just say it, just say it. And they do. And you can see like this, like pressure and relief just leave their shoulders kind of thing. And then with their permission, we use that word back and forth when they feel that feeling again kind of thing. So there's this balance between formality and personalized attention. Once again, that connecting with your client, talking about kind of like what the barriers are, you know, what are the barriers moving beyond, like help offering, respect, encourage to ask questions. There is this cultural taboo against expressing negative feelings directly. And so they may manifest itself in the patient holding information. And so don't make the assumption of kind of like knowing what the client means when they say a word. It's kind of like, what does that mean? What does that mean for you? What's your definition? Because I always like to say, I have my own definition of trauma. What's your definition of trauma? Always remain curious of what is being said. Ask your client, especially with the Latinx population, to expand on what they're explaining in that moment. And, you know, the heart of therapy is to connect also with your ancestral and current values as a starting point as well. Any questions? Because, I mean, I have a case example. I don't know if anybody wants to hear it, or what are your thoughts, class?
We'd love to hear it.
Okay. So this is a client who it's a 22-year-old Latinx female who self-identify as bilingual. She was a first-generation college student. She noted becoming aware of her sexual orientation early in high school, but she was only involved in heterosexual relationships until her junior year of college, mostly because of family. She was enrolled at the time that I saw her, she was enrolled as a senior at a large public institution and eventually graduated with a degree in hospitality management. During her time in treatment with me, she was working, and she was also a member of a sorority as well. She presented for individual counseling for symptoms of depression, anxiety, sadness, loss of interest, difficulties concentrating, excessive worry related to her interpersonal relationships with a partner of 9 months during a crisis consultation. She just reported feeling very overwhelmed in her current relationship because she self-identifies bisexual, while her partner self-identified as heterosexual, so her partner wasn't out. And so there was kind of like, you know, a lot of concerns, kind of like keeping this relationship a secret from their friends, which was a source of stress as well, and not having a lot of support system. But another thing was that she was also was sexually assaulted in college as well, and kept keeping that as a secret as well from others. And so she had multiple stressors, sexual assault, mother diagnosed with breast cancer, kind of thing. And so with her, I noticed that this wasn't her first time in counseling. So she would come in when she was feeling in distress, feeling stressed out, overwhelmed, come in for one session and then just leave. And then once again, when she felt overwhelmed again, she did the same thing. So there was a pattern. And I noticed the pattern in her chart, and I had a discussion about it with her. You know, I used like a multicultural counseling approach to build trust with her and building that client therapist relationship. I discussed with her what were the barriers for her to engage in individual counseling. She knew that we were there. She was using the facilities, but what were the barriers that stopped her from going beyond one session? And it kind of related to kind of like not knowing what therapy was, that fear, being aware, not knowing, but also being aware with therapy, because she had a negative experience with therapy. Being in Florida is called Baker Act. It's involuntary hospitalization. Not sure what it's called in Ohio. But from that experience, the whole trust in the system or in authorities or even in mental health was broken for her. And so that was her fear, that if she talked about her sexual assault or she talked about her suicidal ideations, more specifically suicidal ideations, that would lead to her being hospitalized because that's what happened in the past. So I spent a lot of time working with her, building that rapport, building the confianza, that trust again. And it was not something that I was done in one session. That trust had to be built throughout her whole time. I saw her for a semester, for that whole semester. I had to continuously build that trust with her. And we got to building that trust at one point that she actually told me that she attempted suicide while we were in therapy. And she talked about it, we processed kind of thing. And there's interventions and all the back stuff. But I think the main thing that I want to point out is that by having that discussion up front, kind of like, okay, let me explain what therapy is. What are the barriers? Like, what the fear is, but kind of like, well, how can I get you back to continue coming? That's pretty much what the conversation started. And that's what led to kind of listening and not making assumptions was key as well. And so she did end her therapy. She did graduate, and our last session was mostly focused on her wanting to continue therapy and and realizing kind of like what kind of therapist she wanted. And so she knew she wanted someone who identified also as Latina and who was bilingual, because she was able to, say certain words in Spanish and just screaming in therapy as a, kind of to build that trust and build that safe environment as well. Any questions about her? Or any questions in general? Now we feel good.
Any questions, guys?
I have a comment.
Yeah.
I'm very excited to go home and watch the rest of that video because I think it's so interesting. So thanks for showing that. And like, this was really, really enlightening, I think, for all of us. So I really appreciate it.
You're welcome. I'm going to put the link in the chat. And so you don't have to go and try to dig it up. Let me see if I can find it for you. Yeah, I came across it and I was like, oh,